Things just took an unthinkable turn, and as if this Mitch Marner situation couldn't get any crazier, some shocking new reports have dropped, revealing some quite frankly ridiculous and downright shocking information surrounding Mitch Marner and his relationship with the team, but also the fans. We're going to break down these reports as this dates back not just to this year, not just to last year, but late 2019. And some of these incidents have huge implications going forward for the team. We're going to break down exactly what those are, and you're going to want to stay tuned because it is beyond what any of us expected would have came out from Chris Johnson as well as other reporters. But before we get into it, your guys' support has been absolutely unbelievable. You've been beasts. Thank you very much. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Again, we're on the road to 21,000 subscribers. And again, your support's been unbelievable. Darius, a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, we've been talking in the channel a lot about Mitch Marner, about his contract, his future with the Toronto Maple Leafs. We have some reports and some information that came out that, I said shocking. It is wild, and you're going to want to, stay tuned till the end here because there's a lot of stuff. But let's start with this from Chris Johnston. And this came out, yesterday into late last night, even into some this morning, just rumors and reports floating around. But Chris Johnston detailed the Maple Leafs fans' treatment of Mitch Marner dating back to when he was in contract negotiations in 2019. And he said that some of the behavior has bordered on harassment and said it made it uncomfortable for Marner and his family, which in itself is a little bit crazy. And we'll have some, more context here in a minute. But essentially, he's talking about several incidents involving Mitch Marner and Leafs fans that, crossed the line, between those two. And Chris Johnson said, quote, "If there's two things that made Toronto not a place that Mitch Marner is all that eager to keep playing in, it would be his original contract negotiation in 2019, which he and his camp extended into training camp. He signed a day or two after missing camp that year, and that's when fans started turning on him." We have a ton more, including some incidents as recent as Game 7 following the game with fans. But Darius, this is uncharted territory for discussion surrounding this, a little bit crazy.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And like Chris Johnson said, this all really started in 2019 or around 2019 with the initial contract negotiation that obviously wasn't his ELC. And even with his ELC, I remember there being a story about how Austin Matthews got some bonuses and Lou Lamoriello had this whole rule about, all rookies don't get any bonuses. It's just their ELC. And Mitch Marner didn't get it. Austin Matthews did end up getting one. So obviously there's been bad blood since the beginning because Marner wants, everything that he thinks he's earned at this point at the NHL level. And I feel like this organization, even in 2019, when Kyle Dubas did eventually get that contract done, this organization has bent over backwards for these players to give them everything that they possibly wanted to make them comfortable. And they've given the organization and the fan base nothing in return. And again, it's not just losing. If they lost and they were giving 100%, the fan base wouldn't be the way that they are. But this team and these players haven't done that. Now, as it pertains to Mitch Marner, again, it goes back to 2019 with that whole contract negotiation. The day that Matthews signed his, very quietly, by the way, and it's been that way the entire time, same with Nylander, in their contract negotiations, very quietly signed it. There was a whole story about, Darren Ferris was out in the Toronto media saying this is, ridiculous. And again, you can Google it. We can go back and rehash it all we want. But that happened at the time, and the fan base started to turn on the hometown boy, Mitch Marner. Now, lately, there's been a lot of stuff, as you can see here, and as Chris Johnson was alluding to, that is borderline harassment. There's a story floating around there from the other night. Chris Johnson alluded to it on the podcast, but didn't actually go into specifics, but it's been floating around out there that apparently in the arena after Game 7, there was an elevator that had some players in it. The elevator door opened, some fans came in, and then, there was they were just absolutely giving it to the players. That's the rumor that's out there. So that type of stuff, that's a little bit crazy. Obviously, throwing jerseys, beer on the ice, all of that stuff, throwing beer in the bench. I wouldn't do that stuff, but I think that is just a sign of how fed up and frustrated fans are. And it's a sign to not only the players, but more so management. Like, let's change something up here. This is not working. This group of players don't work. It never really has. And from day one, there has been some friction.
Yeah, and you can even think back to this past offseason, about a year ago now, I guess a bit over a year ago, regarding the Mitch Marner contract negotiations, him and his agent, and how everything was getting a little bit dicey prior to this season starting. And there were some more quotes here. Sorry, feel free to pause and read them. He said Mitch gave interviews like that, or gave interviews at that time, said it was the first time he'd ever been yelled at, talking about how he was walking his dog. Why don't you have a contract? People would ask, and how things have gotten taken beyond just the ice. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say one way or the other who's in the right, who's in the wrong. But the point is, there's clearly some friction here that has come out. And it's convenient that it comes out after they choke once again, whether that's the media intentionally letting that out, whether that's the Leafs wanting the media to leak things like this particularly. this is much different than last year when we were talking about Mitch Marner being traded. We weren't hearing stuff like this. It seems now he is all but gone, especially it would be weird now if they extended him with all these different things that are coming out. And there's always the point of Mitch Marner is a Toronto kid who should have had a record, had a banner, hanging in the rafters and his name all over the record books. Instead, he squeezed the organization for every last cent, never showed up when it mattered, and got booed off the ice in his final game as a Leaf. Again, I've been very adamant on this channel. I don't blame any player for squeezing every last cent out of the team, especially when they're, on the younger side and not, towards the end of their career and they haven't had a big payday yet. I'm not going to blame him for that. However, he hasn't performed. Some of the antics off the ice, not necessarily have been bad on his part, but the way his agent has handled some things has been interesting to say the least, made it maybe a bit more difficult than guys like Nylander and Matthews. But again, it's not for me to say whether or not that's the right thing to do. You guys can have your own opinion on that. However, at the end of the day, these instances are at the very least proving that, and even his body language in the press conference yesterday, it doesn't seem like a guy who's extremely eager to return to Toronto. And that's why I said, A, I doesn't want to comment on his future, and B, he's speaking in the past tense as it pertains to Toronto. And I could see him maybe taking a train ride, a plane ticket, wherever, depending where he goes, to Utah or somewhere like that, to change his scenery. And I'm sure there's a lot of teams, a ton of teams, most teams would be lining up to sign him depending on the money. And I just don't think Toronto is going to be one of them. And I also think Mitch Marner is a very smart man. I think he knows he's going to take the $14 million from somebody. And I think he knows the Leafs aren't going to be willing to do that, because that at this point would just be detrimental. And then you lock yourself in, along with the Matthew Nyes extension, to basically no money to work elsewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, all of this the last couple of days is not saying that Mitch Marner is a bad player. He's a very good player. And like you said, someone is going to pay him a lot of money, north of $13 million. A team is going to pay him that. It could be Philly. It could be, Utah, like you mentioned, a lot of teams. But the one thing I thought was very interesting is, like you said, it doesn't seem like there's an appetite from either end here, either party, to get a contract done. It seems like Mitch Marner wants to leave. A lot of what he was saying the last 2 days was in the past tense. In his exit interview today with the media, he never once said that he wants to return. He was tiptoeing around all of those answers with other stuff, and he said that he loved his time here. Everything was in the past tense. He never once said that he wanted to be here. It was very Kyle Dubas-esque when he was doing his exit interview before he was fired as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And, it's getting pretty crazy. And we don't know exactly what the Leafs are planning at this point in time. We don't even know if all of this could be a smokescreen as well. There was a story back years ago in 2019 that, this is how they negotiate, and it's through the media, and it's playing hardball, right? Him and his camp and his agent. I mean, his agent at one point said that they were going to go to Columbus. They were going to sign an offer sheet in 2019. They were gone. They were going to Columbus. And when that fell through, obviously, then they were like, we're going to go to Switzerland unless we get what we want, right? There was the whole thing about that in 2019. So maybe they are still trying to get a contract done, but I don't think that's the case at this point in time. I think they are going to part ways, and it is unfortunate that it came to this. But listen, it started mostly in 2019, and then his play didn't back anything up. And like I said, it's not just him, but this organization bent over backwards for 4 guys in particular to give them everything that they wanted, every single thing that they wanted, and they didn't end up repaying the fan base and the organization. And like you mentioned too, I'll never blame a player for getting as much as they can on a deal, especially when they are younger, and obviously they're trying to make as much money as they can through their age now, and not when they're like in their late 30s. But this organization gave them everything, and they never repaid it back.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. And of course, Mitch Marner is hopefully he'll be playing tonight, or yesterday, sorry. And I mean, we all were hoping that Mitch Marner and the Leafs, regardless of your thoughts on Mitch Marner, would have been playing in yesterday's game against the Carolina Hurricanes. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. That'll wrap it up. It's a very interesting time right now. We're going to keep you up to date, multiple videos a day, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. See you later.